pisache. When it's ready, it eats your soul.
I love cartoons, just nice, warm, moving pictures that lull you into the fun, light-hearted worlds where the true evils of the world don't exist, depending on the animation you watch. Anyway, I'm an anime fan as well, and that stuff can get pretty dark. But we're focusing on those happy, wholesome tunes today with dark urban legends lurking in their shadows. I'm your host, James, and these are the top 10 disturbing cartoon urban legends too real to ignore. And we're starting out the list with the Lost Mickey Mouse cartoon. According to the story, Leonard Maltin, a renowned film critic and historian, was reviewing old cartoons for the Disney Treasures Collection DVD. During this process, he and some colleagues stumbled upon a particularly disturbing and surreal Mickey Mouse short film with a title I can't really say on here, but it didn't sound like a title Walt would have okayed. The cartoon began with Mickey Mouse walking down a continuous street, a monotonous and repetitive backdrop accompanied by an unsettling, dissonant soundtrack. As the cartoon progressed, Mickey's expression supposedly became increasingly distressed and disturbed. The animation style is described as crude and distorted. There's no coherent plot, with Mickey aimlessly walking, occasionally encountering unsettling and surreal imagery before it completely cut to black. When the cartoon came back, things got even worse. Mickey was walking down the same street on repeat, but now there was no music, just an indistinguishable murmuring in the background. Then Mickey's face began to melt as the world around him became more and more distorted. Some versions of the story claim that the original viewers were so deeply disturbed by the animation that a few of them even experienced psychological distress. If you are enjoying our channel so far, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We have awesome videos coming at you on the daily, so don't miss out. Alright, number 9, we have Dr. Claw's True Identity. Any Inspector Gadget fans in the audience? I always forget about this show, a bit before my time, I guess. That theme song, though, I'll be on my deathbed, unable to recognize my own grandkids, but, sing that tune, I'll be like, go, Gadget, go! Anyway, Dr. Claw is the big villain of this series, but we never see who Dr. Claw actually is. Just his metal arm stroking his devilish cat as he exclaims, "I'll get you next time, Gadgets." So, the question is, what does Dr. Claw actually look like? Well, this theory goes that Dr. Claw is actually the real Inspector Gadget. He had died from a terrible accident that destroyed most of his body. Gadget's niece Penny, distraught with grief, then built the Inspector Gadget we see in the show, a replica of sorts. So, his vengeful spirit now seeks to destroy his imposter. It's a fun idea. If Inspector Gadget was darker and aimed at an older audience, this would have been a cool direction to take the show in. A nice final season twist, perhaps. At our number 8 spot, we have the Lost SpongeBob Squidward episode. So the story goes that a former Nickelodeon intern claimed to have stumbled upon a mysterious and disturbing episode of SpongeBob. The episode supposedly starts with Squidward preparing for a clarinet concert, but the atmosphere is just unusually tense, and Squidward appears visibly distressed. As the episode progresses, the tone becomes increasingly sinister. Squidward's concert ends up going horribly wrong, leading to a loud, high-pitched sound, and then we cut back to Squidward, who is shown sitting on the edge of his bed, crying softly. The animation becomes hyper-realistic. I guess how it is whenever it does those close-up gnarly paintings in SpongeBob. Squidward's eyes are bloodshot, and his sobs just get louder and more anguished. Then the scene continues.
Taste is not an option.
For several minutes before Squidward takes his own life. Apparently, this lost episode was so disturbing that the original animators and crew members were traumatized after watching it. Some versions go that the intern who discovered the episode was then fired, and the episode itself was destroyed to prevent it from ever being aired. At number 7, we have the Parasect is a zombie theory. Now, this is a Pokemon fan theory. There's gonna be some of you out there like, oh, don't call anime cartoons. I know Pokemon is an anime. It's insulting to use the word cartoon. It's animation. Alright, anyway. let's talk about the Pokemon Parasect and its previous form, Paras. These Pokemon have little mushrooms attached to their back, Tochukatsu mushrooms, which are parasitic. They draw on the nutrients in the Pokemon's body, but Paras is not fully under the control of the mushrooms, but some of their actions are partially influenced by them. But as these mushrooms continue to grow, Paras evolves into Parasect. At this point, the mushroom on its back is far larger. It basically takes up the whole body, and now it has full control over the creature, and Parasect only has the whites of its eyes exposed, almost like it's dead and doesn't even need to see, as its actions are completely controlled by the large mushroom on its back. And it's also said that removing the mushroom from a Parasect's back will stop it from moving altogether. Maybe what that really means is that Parasect has no life left in it anymore, simply being a vessel for its mushroom to control. This is based on a real-life parasitic fungus called Cordyceps, which invade the bodies of different insects and basically turn them into mindless zombies in real life. The Cordyceps will actually grow out of their host's bodies too, much like what you have here. So this one, not too far-fetched, probably is exactly what they were intending. Next on the list we have Dead Bart. The Lost Simpsons episode entitled Dead Bart is a creepypasta, an internet horror story that revolves around an alleged lost episode of The Simpsons. According to the story, an anonymous writer claims to be a former writer for the show who worked on an episode titled Dead Bart, which was never aired. In this creepy tale, the lost episode begins with the familiar Simpsons family sitting on the couch, but everything appears slightly off. The colors are muted, the animation quality is poorer than usual. The family also seems to have genuine disdain for each other, not the type of lighthearted, jokey bickering you typically see in the show. The atmosphere is just eerie. The Simpsons get on a plane, and Bart, having messed around like Bart does, accidentally breaks a window and gets sucked out before falling to his death. The art is described as looking far too realistic to be anything other than disturbing. We cut to the rest of the family sitting at the dinner table sobbing. The scene goes on longer than it should, and there's no humor to the crying. It's not exaggerated enough to be funny. It's just sad. We cut to 1 year later, and Marge, Homer, and Lisa are skeletally thin now, sitting at the dinner table once again. Maggie, nowhere to be seen. They decide to visit Bart's grave, but when they get there, Bart's body is just laying right in front of his gravestone in a state of decomposition, drawn in that same realistic art style as before. At this point, Homer makes a joke, but it isn't entirely clear what the joke is. Then it fades to black as the episode comes to an end. No music, just crudely drawn credits. Next up, we have another Pokemon conspiracy theory, the Cubone's mother theory. So it's pretty well known that Cubone wears the skull of its deceased mother, which is already pretty dark. You'd think its mother is Marowak, though, right? But maybe not. For a long time, fans have speculated that maybe Cubone is the orphan child of Kangaskhan. The two Pokemon, they do look pretty similar. Same color scheme. They both have 3 fingers with claws in the shape of Kangaskhan's head, kind of similar to the skull Cubone wears. So the idea is that Cubone would evolve into Marowak. Marowak would evolve into its 3rd evolution, Kangaskhan, and then the cycle would repeat. Now, this does help explain why Cubone doesn't have an official 3rd evolution. Not that every Pokemon does, but some don't even evolve at all. But anyway, I could see this one making sense. Next up, we have Ed, and Eddie's Purgatory theory. This is a pretty popular one, also very dark. The idea here is that the characters are actually in Purgatory, a place between heaven and hell where the souls are cleansed of their sins before moving on to the afterlife. I guess the main crux of this theory is that the characters don't leave their suburban cul-de-sac. No matter how much they try, they're always stuck in the same place, kind of like Purgatory, where souls are trapped until they are purified of their sins. The show's setting is also a bit ambiguous. There aren't any adults around, and the neighborhood seems frozen in this perpetual summer. There's also theories written about each character and their past and like how they died and stuff, but that's There's not really any evidence in the show to support that stuff. It's more just pure fiction, but anyway, interesting theory. At number 3, we have another Simpsons one. This one is more general. The Simpsons knack for predicting the future. There have been so many instances of this that some people believe it just can't be a coincidence. One of the most famous instances is the episode Bart to the Future, the episode where Bart glimpses into the future and finds that his sister Lisa has become the president of the United States, succeeding a fictional President Donald Trump. And of course, in 2017, Donald Trump was actually inaugurated as the 45th President of the United States. Another crazy prediction came in Homer Votes 2012, where a voting machine malfunctions, changing Homer's vote from Barack Obama to Mitt Romney. In the 2012 presidential elections, similar issues with voting machines were reported, although not involving characters from The Simpsons. The show has also been credited with predicting various technological advancements and societal changes. They showcased smartwatches in 1995, long before they became a big mainstream gadget. The advent of autocorrect on phones was also humorously shown in a 1994 episode. And the list goes on. We could do an entire list of Simpsons predictions alone, and oh wait, we actually have. All right, one last Pokemon theory for you. There's so many, I couldn't help myself. This one concerns Mimikyu. Yeah, these unsettling looking creepy Pokemon and Pikachu costumes. There's always been the mystery as to what Mimikyu really looks like under there, as its outward appearance is really just a disguise, a crudely slapped together Pikachu costume. So yeah, what is going on under there? Well, this theory suggests that maybe Mimikyu is actually more closely related to Pikachu than we might think. It doesn't just want to look like Pikachu, it's not just dressing up as one, it's Pikachu's former form Pichu, only dead. Undead Pichus that never got a chance to evolve and now wear these haphazard disguises and these attempts to take on the form they wish they could have reached in life. Honestly, this one, not that far-fetched, especially when you look at their typing. Mimikyu is a ghost fairy type. Kind of feel bad for these little things now. Another thing that ties into Pichu is they know some of the same moves, like Thunderbolt. Pretty interesting. Finally, though, number 1, we have the SpongeBob nuclear testing theory. This fan theory suggests that Bikini Bottom might be based on Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands. Bikini Atoll was the site of several hydrogen bomb tests conducted by the United States between 1946 and 58. So according to this theory, these nuclear tests caused these sea creatures in Bikini Bottom to become radioactive and granting them human-level intelligence and abilities, explaining their ability to speak, attend school, hold down jobs, that and the fact that it's a cartoon, but forget about that for now. And an anonymous source claiming to be affiliated with the SpongeBob SquarePants production team once stated that some fan theories, like this one, are considered semi-canon among the writing staff. The theory gained further momentum when the interpretation of the episode where SpongeBob visits Rock Bottom, one of my favorite episodes. Some fans speculate that the dark, nightmarish rock bottom could be the result of a giant crater left by one of the nuclear bombs. With all that said, I've been your host James, and I'll catch you, yes you specifically, in the next video.
Why are so many businesses using Snapchat ads? Let's ask Playbite.
We realized there was a big overlap between Snapchat users and our target audience of young gamers.
Snapchat is the most effective way for your business to reach Gen Z and millennials. They control a massive $5 trillion in spending power, and are 34% more likely to buy something after seeing it on Snapchat.
With the help of Snapchat, we've been able to reach our monthly active user and revenue goals every single month.
Starting off this countdown, we have Elizabeth Wetlaufer.
I've done this, and I'm ready to face it, but I would love to go home for a night.
Elizabeth Elizabeth Wetlaufer was a Canadian registered nurse for 9 years in southwestern Ontario. In 2016, she quit her nursing job, checked herself into a psychiatric hospital, and confessed to her crimes. Apparently, between 2007 to 2016, she used her powers as a nurse to take the lives of 8 of her patients and injured 6 others. She would do so by giving them lethal doses of insulin. She also admitted to stealing opioids to fuel her personal addiction. After she confessed to the killings, an interview took place with the police, and that's when she confessed her crimes once again, this time in a detailed statement. Apparently, she had voices in her head telling her to kill those patients.
Part of me had started to believe that it was the devil, and part of me thought it might be God as a purpose through my life.
At first, she believed that this was God talking to her, so she felt okay killing for him. Then later on, she thought maybe it was the devil. On top of that, she claimed that it was a gut instinct telling her that these people needed to be killed. And once she did the deed, she would hear laughter in her chest.
Whatever it wasn't a voice in my head, it was a voice in here. And when I would do it afterwards, I would hear like a laughter in my head.
She was sentenced to 8 concurrent life sentences with no chance of parole for 25 years. In our 9th spot, we have Robert Durst. Robert Durst is an American convicted murderer and possible serial killer. It all started in 1982 with the disappearance of his wife, Kathy Durst. Obviously, he was the main suspect. Then in 2000, he murdered one of his friends, Susan Berman, and in 2001, he killed his neighbor. And just this year, he was finally convicted for killing his wife. During his interviews and interrogations, he maintained his innocence, claiming that he never did it. But after one of his final interviews, he made a grave mistake. He went to the bathroom and didn't realize that his mic was still on. While in the bathroom, he was talking to himself and basically confessed to the killings.
There it is. Your court. Sister. What the hell did I do? Kill them all. Of course.
The interviewers were completely shocked by what they heard, and Robert was immediately arrested. In our 8th spot, we have Daniel Wozenak. Daniel Wozenak is a former community theater actor who in May of 2010 took the lives of 2 people. During that time, he was struggling financially. He was in debt and unemployed. Then when he heard that his friend Sam Herr had $62,000 from combat pay, he decided to kill Sam in order to steal his money. Then he ended up killing a woman named Julie Kabushi, a 23-year-old college student who was tutoring Sam. His plan was to make it seem like Sam killed Julie and then went on the run. But in the end, he was caught. This video is from the police interrogation of Daniel. Here's him putting the blame on Sam.
Opened the door, it was Sam. Alright. I'm like, hey man, what's going on? Everything good? And he's like, not good, we're in trouble. We need to get the out of here. And so Joey's like, there's a dead body in my apartment. He said he'd been doing some heavy drugs. He's like, I shot somebody. I was not happy about it. It was a fit of rage, and honestly, she had it coming. I said she.
But of course, the police weren't buying his story. It was all too convenient.
Where's the gun, Sam? What did you do with the gun?
I'm not Sam, my name's Daniel.
I know, but that's what you were. Wasn't that what you were asking him?
No, I have nothing to do with this because my life was in danger with my wife. I'm sorry.
How was your life in danger?
He threatened it.
The 2 interrogators could see through Daniel's act. In fact, they said it was as if he was putting on a theater show for them. In the end, Daniel did confess, but figured he might try and act insane in order to get off with lesser charges.
Money and insanity.
Money and insanity. Okay.
In our 7th spot, we have patient number 18. Now, this has got to be one of the creepiest and mysterious clips on the internet. It's an interview featuring a man named Patient 18. This interview is filmed at a psychiatric hospital, and this man is there because he has schizophrenia. This tape is actually what schools use to teach their students about schizophrenia and the mind. But it's mysterious because we don't know much about this dude. Now, I just want to say, having schizophrenia or mental health issues does not make this guy an evil person. He's on today's list because apparently at the hospital he admitted to taking someone's life. Plus, he has a history of criminal behavior. Upon doing more research, this might be a man named Stephen E. Anyways, take a look at this interview.
And what happened that ended up with your being here in the hospital?
The psychiatrist decided that this was the situation for me.
And did he tell you why?
No, the psychiatrist did not.
Has anybody told you why?
No.
I got chills. I don't know about you. It's quite interesting how he carefully plans out his answers. Plus, no matter what they're talking about, he still shows no emotion.
And in what way are you different?
I am trying to do with my life something which few people try to do. And this influences my thinking and consequently my actions.
He may seem calm on the outside, but what you can't imagine is everything that's going on in his head. You can tell he's trying hard to stay in control.
As soon as I express the belief that I do not belong in this hospital, which is a mental hospital, then those who dislike me want to find a worse place for me.
In our sixth spot, we have Alonso Perez. In 2016, Alonso Perez was charged for a series of crimes, including robbery with use of a deadly weapon, attempted murder with use of a deadly weapon, grand larceny, and battery. He was also arrested in connection with the death of Mohammed Robinson. This is footage of Alonso inside of the interrogation cell waiting to be questioned. But not much of that actually happens, as he manages to escape. First, we see him looking around at the cameras, and then he decides to forcibly remove his handcuffs. Now, he does manage to get them off, but he's not ready to leave yet. He hasn't thought of a plan. So he pretends that his handcuffs are still on and he thinks of an escape plan. When he thinks of his plan, he gets up, climbs up, and escapes by crawling through the ceiling. He then drove away in a rental truck that someone left with the engine running. But don't worry, it was short-lived freedom because within days he was caught again, and in more trouble. In the end though, he did plead guilty to 3 murders. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Andre Chikatilo. Andre Chikatilo, otherwise known as the Butcher of Rostov or the Rostov Ripper, was responsible for the deaths of 56 individuals. He would lure people that he met at bus stops or train stations away to remote locations, and then he would murder them. Sometimes he would even eat certain parts of his victims. In this interview, what shocks a lot of people is the fact that everyone expects him to act like a monster, but in fact, he acts quite the opposite. He seems innocent, which is either an act or, his true personality. So he keeps up the innocent act saying how he feels sorry, blah blah blah. But the act drops when he is asked one question. Now the interview is in Russian, but I have the translation. So the interviewer asks him if he has ever thought about meeting his victims in heaven or hell. He answers with, and I quote, "No, I have never thought about that, never. I feel like it doesn't bother me. I have never thought about it. I have already passed all rounds of hell in my life. I am already ready to pass away to the other world again." That right there is creepy, not gonna lie. In our 4th spot, we have David Berkowitz, but you probably better know him as the son of Sam. He was a serial killer who took the lives of 6 individuals and wounded 7 others in New York City for more than a year. He would typically target good-looking young women with long brown hair. As a result, a number of women were cutting their hair short or dyeing it blonde. He was eventually known as the son of Sam because he would leave letters near his victims' bodies, signing it off with that name. In the end, he was caught and claimed that his neighbor's dog was possessed by a demon, and that this demon dog was the one telling him to kill these people. Wild, I know. Well, years later, he did this interview. He admits to being into Satanism and how it influenced him.
Yeah. When you talk about Satan, what are you actually referring to?
Well, many people may not really understand that, but there was a time I was so confused and so troubled that I was seeking meaning and purpose. I was seeking something, I don't know, as my life began to spin out of control, I got involved in Satanism, and I was reading the Satanic Bible.
He continues on talking about himself, but a lot of people believe he was just putting on an act the whole time, that he was trying to convince people that he's normal so that he would be released early. This is pretty common among serial killers. They love to manipulate people.
How does it feel to be here for 30 years knowing that this is going to be it?
It's like, the expression, take one day at a time, and it's never easy, being incarcerated. I have no one to blame but myself.
In our third spot, we have Michael Beaver. In July of 2015, 16-year-old Michael Beaver and his 18-year-old brother Robert took the lives of their parents and 3 siblings. They first attacked their sister. When she screamed, their mother ran out of the bedroom and they stabbed her over 50 times. Eventually, they worked their way around the house, killing their family members. It's a very scary and graphic case. In this interview, Michael completely confesses to everything to an officer.
So he was buying weapons because you guys had talked about murdering.
Yeah, and he started planning it.
Okay. And that you didn't want to do it?
I don't want to do it. I didn't, just because I didn't kill anyone.
Okay.
I stabbed someone.
Who did you stab?
My younger brother, Christopher.
Christopher. How old's Christopher?
9, I think.
What did you stab him with?
My knife.
What's your knife look like?
There's literally no emotion in his voice, and for being so young, he doesn't seem affected by this at all. But here's the thing, this guy was obsessed with other killers, and the police officer noticed this and kept prying.
Because you mentioned a couple names. Are those like serial killers or something?
What, like Columbine?
Yeah.
Columbine and James Egan Holmes. James Egan Holmes is a guy that shot at the theater.
In Colorado?
Yeah, he killed 12 and...
Wow. How many were killed in Columbine?
Columbine? I don't know, like 15,
okay.
I think.
He knew the killer's first and last names and their kill count. No one just knows that information off the top of their head, so that's creepy. In our second spot, we had the BTK killer. Between the years of 1974 to 1991, American serial killer Dennis Rader took the lives of 10 individuals. In 2005, he was convicted for his crimes and was sentenced to 175 years in solitary confinement without the possibility of parole. This video is Dennis's confession to killing Maureen Hedge.
So I very carefully snuck into the house, kind of like a cat burglar, and after checking the house, she wasn't there. So about that time, the doors rattled, so I went back to one of the bedrooms and hid back there in one of the bedrooms.
He then proceeded to talk about how he stayed in her house for hours until the next morning when he woke up and strangled her.
No, I manually strangled her when she started to scream.
So you used your hands?
Yes, sir.
And you strangled her? Did she die?
Yes.
It's chilling seeing him talk so casually about all of this. And in our number 1 spot today, we have Issei Sagawa.
たった指先ほどの小さな銃弾を放ったことによってさまざまな人たちを傷つけ、あるいは変えてしまう。
If you haven't heard of this case, then brace yourself, because it's a very dark and gruesome one. In 1981, Issei Sagawa killed and ate a woman named Renee Hartfelt. Apparently, he always had a fantasy to eat a beautiful human. When he saw Renee, he knew she was the one. On June 11th, 1981, he invited her over, and then he shot her at the back of the neck and then ate her over the next 2 days. That's not even the worst part. The worst part is that he was never convicted of his crimes. He literally spent 2 days in jail, then was sent back to Japan, and then he became a celebrity there. He was so famous that he made a living through the public's interest in his crime. Imagine that, literally becoming wealthy for killing someone. He's guilty, he's even admitted to it, but he never got penalized. Here are some disturbing moments from an interview with him.
多分もう一晩でも食事をルネとしていたら食べる対象には考えたことはない。自分の書いたシナリオ、ずっと前からそういうシチュエーションを考えて、どっから食べる、どうやってやる、全てこう頭の中にシナリオができてた。
He continues on, going into gruesome details about his murder and about another time that he attacked a different woman. I personally had a hard time sitting still watching this. It's just way too much. Moving on to number 9, we have Alan Leger. Alan Leger is a Canadian serial killer who on June 21st of 1986 entered a convenience store in Black River Bridge, New Brunswick with 2 other accomplices and robbed the joint. While doing so, they beat the store owner to death, but they were later caught and arrested. He was given a life sentence and sent to prison. However, in 1989, he managed to escape and was on the run for 7 months. During this time, he killed 4 more innocent people. He also committed arson and a list of other crimes as well. Eventually, he was recaptured and is now spending the rest of his life in Canada's Maximum Security Special Handling Unit. Moving on to number 8, we have Rodney Halbauer. Ever since Rodney was young, he has been committing crimes. It started when he was only 16 years old. During his younger years, he was arrested and released on parole a number of times. But when released, he would commit more crimes like theft, In 1975, Rodney was released on bail after taking advantage of a Las Vegas blackjack dealer. But while on bail, he took advantage of and killed 6 other women and received a life sentence. However, in 1977, he actually escaped jail and kidnapped his own daughter. Shortly after, he was recaptured, only to escape again in 1986. While on the run, he stabbed and injured another woman. Thankfully, once again, he was recaptured. Wouldn't you think after the first time they would keep a closer eye on him? Guess not. In our 7th spot, we have Thomas Silverstein. Now, this dude is said to be one of the most dangerous prisoners of all time, and the most violent prisoner in America. He was first jailed in 1978 for armed robbery. While in jail, he killed a prison officer and 2 inmates. He also was the leader for the Aryan Brotherhood prison gang for quite some time. This prison gang is the largest and deadliest prison gang in the US, with an estimated 20,000 members inside the prison and on the streets. Because of how many people he killed and injured in prison, Silverstein got
what's going on?
transferred
What's
to a
going
federal
on?
prison in Atlanta.
Make sure you
There
tell
he was confined in a 6 by
Nemo and
7
everybody
foot cell.
to
He was
jump
under
on, because I need to
24-hour
maintain at least 3
surveillance.
people.
In fact, the
you know?
lights in his cell were never turned off so that they could always watch him. Silverstein eventually died in prison at the age of 67. In our 6th spot today, we have Victor Figueroa. On February 6, 1997, Victor Figueroa managed to escape Maroa Shock Incarceration Facility in Mineville, New York. Victor had been serving a 1 to 4 year sentence for drug possession, but decided to take his chances and flee. When authorities noticed that he was missing, they searched the area, but all the leads ran cold. He has not been seen or heard from since. In fact, he's the only New York State prison inmate to escape and never be found. Either he's still out there or he died while trying to escape. Either way, it's a bit scary thinking that he could potentially still be out there. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with James Eddie Diggs. To the public, James Eddie Diggs seemed like a top-notch citizen. He seemed to be a great family man with a happy wife and 2 young sons. However, in the morning of May 26, 1949, he shot and killed his wife and kids before disappearing forever. Police did manage to find him a week later, but he managed to escape the officer by shooting him in the face and killing him. He since fled into the woods and hasn't been caught since. In fact, he was one of the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives for the longest time, but he was eventually removed from the list in 1961 and is said to be dead by now. In our 4th spot, we have Robert Maudsley. Robert Maudsley is considered Britain's most dangerous prisoner, and you're about to find out why. In 1974, Maudsley was arrested for taking advantage of young individuals, but during his trial, he was found unfit and was sent to Broadmoor Hospital instead of a prison. While there, Maudsley and another patient locked themselves in a cell with another patient and held him hostage. While there, they tortured him to death over a period of 9 hours. After this incident, he was convicted of manslaughter and was sent to Wakefield Prison. And there, he killed 3 inmates. After which he got placed in solitary confinement and spends his life in a glass cell underneath Wakefield Jail. In our 3rd spot, we have George Edward Wright. In 1962, George Edward Wright was convicted for murder and was sentenced to up to 30 years in prison. Wright and 3 other men went on a spree of armed robbery, one in which they shot a man and took off with his money, which was only $70, so was it really worth it? Anyways, they were caught and put into jail. But then in 1970, Wright managed to escape from a prison in New Jersey. He was caught and locked up
I
once
said,
again, only to escape
tell
once
mommy
more
and everybody
in
to jump on.
1972. This
Because I need to
time,
maintain
he made
3
sure he
people
was
so that I
never
could
going
get
to be
affiliated.
caught again. So he came up with a plan. This plan involved hijacking a Delta Airlines flight and collecting ransom for the release of the passengers. Upon doing so, they flew the plane to Portugal. In 2011, the police caught up with him in Portugal, but since Portugal has no extradition treaty with the United States, Wright was released. He remains a fugitive to this day. Coming in at number 2, we have Eric Rudolph. In 1996, Eric Rudolph bombed Atlanta's Centennial Olympic Park during the Summer Games. As a result, 2 individuals were killed and over 100 were injured. But this was just the beginning of his deadly bombing spree. He pulled off 3 more bombings, injuring hundreds more. For 5 years, the police were on a hunt for Eric. At one point, he was one of the top 10 fugitives on the FBI's list. It wasn't until 2003 that Eric got arrested. Turns out that he was hiding in the mountains for 5 years. Being a skilled outdoorsman, this helped him greatly. When he was caught, he pled guilty to all 4 bombings and was given 4 life sentences without the possibility of parole. He's now spending the rest of his life in the super prison in Florence, Colorado. And in our number 1 spot today, we have Santiago Maduros. In 2010, Santiago fired into a random person's car, because one of the passengers was wearing the wrong color jacket. The victim had no ties to any gang. He was just an innocent person riding in his sister's car. He was severely injured and his sister was unfortunately killed. A couple weeks later, Santiago and some of his friends were robbing a car, and when a group of men tried to stop them, he shot at them as well. He killed a random person that was just at the wrong place at the wrong time. From there, he was on the run for about a decade. Starting off this countdown, we have the Hitchhiker's Killer. The Hitchhiker's Killer is the name given to serial killer Donald Henry Gaskins. He started his killings in 1969, where he would pick up hitchhikers to later kill them. It's believed that he killed more than a dozen people. But even before he went on this killing spree, Gaskins had a history of sick crimes. Finally, on November 14th of 1975, Gaskins was arrested after a man witnessed him killing 2 men and called the police. He was later sentenced to death, but this sentence turned into life imprisonment without any possibility of parole. However, his killings did not stop while behind bars. While in prison, he became the only man to have ever killed an inmate on death row. In our 9th spot today, we have Glenn Stark Chambers. In January of 1975, Glenn Stark Chambers got into a heated dispute with his girlfriend, Connie Weeks. It ended with him taking her life. As a result, he was sentenced to death by electric chair, later reduced to life imprisonment. However, Glenn escaped prison on July 13th. Glenn, with 2 other inmates, ganged up to attack their detention officer and then escaped through a window. Now, he was captured 3 days later, but only to escape several years later. So he worked with the prison to help build furniture. He came up with a good idea to put himself into one of the boxes and have himself carried out of prison in a transport truck, and it worked. Even after 3 decades, Glenn has never been found. If he was still alive today, he would be in his 70s, so he could still be out there somewhere. In our 8th spot, we have Ted Bundy. Now, what was so scary about Ted Bundy is how smart he was. He was the definition of evil genius. So basically, he would use his smarts to manipulate women and then kill them. Bundy is said to be responsible for murdering 30 women, although it's thought that his number is much higher. Now, Bundy was actually able to escape custody multiple times. The first time, he jumped out of a 2nd-story building and fled while at the courthouse. He had planned this for days, practicing jumping from his top bed bunk in prison down to the floor to strengthen his ankles. Now, eventually he was caught, but then a while later he escaped again. This time he forced himself to lose weight in order to squeeze through a hole in his cell ceiling. When he did escape the second time, he went on to murder more women, until being caught once again. In our 7th spot, we have Charles Manson. Infamous cult leader Charles Manson, who led the Manson family cult, had his followers commit crimes and murders on his behalf. Some of his members committed a series of 9 murders in July and August of 1969. In 1971, Manson was convicted of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder for the deaths of 7 people, including film actress Sharon Tate.
Did you let Mommy know to jump on?
He was also an evil genius. If you've ever seen his interviews, he acts quite wild and strange. People think that he's out of his mind. At one point, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and paranoid delusion disorder. But some people think that he was just too smart for his own good and he was just faking all of this. In 1971, Manson received the death sentence, but a year later, the government got rid of capital punishment, so his sentence was changed to life in prison instead. In our 6th spot, we have Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. Between 1963 and 1965, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley worked together to torture, take advantage of, and kill a number of young individuals. What they did was incredibly messed up, and it'll make your stomach churn. Now, these 2 were actually given the name the Moors Murderers because after taking the lives of their victims, they would bury their bodies on the moors outside of Manchester. Both individuals were sentenced to life in prison for their crimes. Ian was actually placed in solitary confinement, whereas Myra died in prison in 2002. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Lester Eubanks. In 1965, Lester was convicted of taking the life of Mary Ellen Diener. As a result, he was given the death penalty, which later got changed to a life sentence. Now, over the years in prison, apparently Lester changed his ways and became very well behaved. In fact, on December 7th, 1973, they let him go out to Christmas shop for his family. While out in a mall, he managed to escape his guards and flee. To this day, he still hasn't been caught. He's out there somewhere in hiding. who knows where he fled to or what he's up to now. Coming in at number 4, we have Robert William Fisher. Now, this guy is one of the FBI's most wanted fugitives. He is on the run after a triple homicide and arson. On April 9th, 2001, Fisher took the lives of his wife and 2 children before blowing up their house. It is still unclear as to why he did this, and he's been on the run ever since, and police have no leads. On April 20th, his car was found in a forest near Payson, Arizona, but Robert was nowhere to be found. On November 3rd, 2021, Fisher was removed from the FBI's most wanted fugitives list. But despite them doing this, he still remains a very wanted fugitive. In our 3rd spot, we have Bradford Bishop. Bradford Bishop Jr. is a former United States Foreign Service officer who is now a wanted fugitive. On March 1st of 1976, Bishop started to spiral after not receiving the promotion he really wanted. He then left his work early, drove to the bank, withdrew money, and then bought a sledgehammer, gas can, shovel, and pitchfork. He then returned home where he killed his wife, mother, and 3 sons. He then drove the bodies several miles away before burying them in a wooded swamp area before setting them on fire. As a result, he was placed on the FBI's list of 10 most wanted fugitives. They have no clue as to where Bishop is now. He could be anywhere, but they do believe that he fled to Europe. Moving on to number 2, we have Arthur Hutchinson. Arthur Hutchinson has lived a life of crime for murder, attempted murder, theft, and burglary. In fact, he spent 5 years in prison for the attempted murder of his half-brother. In September of 1983, he was brought into a police station after being arrested for theft. While there, he asked to go to the bathroom and then proceeded to jump out of the bathroom window and fled. He was on the run for 3.5 weeks. While on the run, he crashed a wedding and murdered the bride's father, mother, and brother. Later that day, he broke into another person's home and stabbed all 3 of the residents to death. He was finally caught on November 5th of 1983 and sentenced to life imprisonment. And in our number 1 spot today, we have Ahmed Siraji. From 1986 to 1997, Ahmed took the lives of 42 females. The bodies of his victims were found in a sugarcane field. What he would do was, after killing them, he would bury them waist deep in his field with their heads facing his house. He believed that by doing so, this gave him great power. But he was later caught and arrested alongside his sisters and 3 wives who helped him. One of his wives was actually sentenced to death, but that was later changed to life imprisonment. Ahmed, on the other hand, was sentenced to death by a firing squad in 2008. Starting off this countdown, we have Donald Harvey, aka the Angel of Death. Donald Harvey is a nurse turned serial killer. So he was working in a hospital as a nurse and was secretly killing off his patients. To him, he was doing them a favor. He thought that his chronically ill patients needed a relief from the pain, so he would smother them with pillows or would poison them or let their oxygen tanks run out. It's believed that he took the lives of over 70 people. However, in 1987, he was only convicted for 37 counts of murder. He was sentenced to life plus 20 years. In March of 2017, Harvey was beat up badly by a fellow inmate. He passed away shortly after. In our 9th spot, we have Albert DeSalvo. Albert DeSalvo, better known as the Boston Strangler, took the lives of 13 women between 1962 and 1964. He would strangle these women with a piece of their clothing before taking advantage of them. In January of 1967, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. A month later, him and 2 other inmates actually managed to escape from prison, and a full-scale manhunt ensued.
Okay.
Thankfully, it wasn't long until he was recaptured. However, in 1973, Albert was stabbed to death by another prisoner. In our 8th spot, we have Ronnie McPeters. Now, Ronnie McPeters has actually been deemed too insane to execute. So Ronnie was first arrested after taking the life of a 27-year-old woman. The woman, Linda Marie Baltazar, was running errands when Ronnie came up to her window while panhandling. She shooed him away and he left. But he ended up coming back and shooting her. He was first placed in jail for his crime and then placed in the rubber room. But that didn't stop him because he was known to set fires in the jail and harass other inmates. So they moved him to San Quentin Prison where he was awaiting death row. And that's when he started acting even crazier. Apparently he would attack other prisoners and guards, and was known to smear his feces all over his cell and even himself. This behavior got him off of death row. They literally thought that he was far too troubled to be executed. In our 7th spot, we have Mark Chopper Reed. Mark Reed is an Australian criminal who lived a life of crime. He was known to rip off drug dealers as well as he would kidnap and torture members of the criminal underworld. It's believed that he was responsible for the death of 19 people and the attempted murder of 11 others. In fact, the movie Chopper is based off of his life, and it's a wild movie. The things he would do were insane. For example, he had a fellow inmate cut both of his ears off so that he could leave H Division and be transferred to a different wing. He also once played Russian roulette with himself. Who does that for fun? In our sixth spot today, we have Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer is one of the most famous serial killers in the world. People all around the world know of him and the sadistic and disturbing crimes that he committed. From 1978 to 1991, Jeffrey murdered and dismembered 17 male individuals. What he did afterwards was even more disturbing. He would keep some of the body parts as souvenirs, even take photographs of the deceased. When police searched his home, they found it littered with human remains. Dahmer was finally arrested on July 22nd of 1991. However, while in prison, there were multiple attempts on his life. On November 28, 1994, an inmate, Christopher Scarver, finally succeeded at taking Dahmer's life. His reasoning behind this? Well, apparently Dahmer was known to taunt others in prison. He would do this by making his prison food look like severed limbs to taunt the other people. He would even drizzle ketchup on top of his blood. Christopher and others found this very unnerving, so he decided to take action against him and beat him to death. We are now at our fifth and halfway mark with Jason Barnum, aka better known as Eyeball Man. And that's because he literally has a tattoo on his eyeball. Like, he tattooed it completely black. If that doesn't speak volumes about who he is, then I don't know what does. He also has one side of his face tattooed to look like a skull. So not only does this dude look like a scary prisoner, but he is one. This dude has a long list of crimes under his belt, including possession of heroin, first-degree attempted murder, first-degree burglary, and third-degree felony in possession of a weapon. In fact, he was sentenced to 22 years in jail after shooting a police officer. Moving on to number 4, we have Nico Jenkins. This guy is one of the scariest inmates in the world. Some say he's the craziest inmate in the world, and you're about to find out why. One time, he killed a man just because he stared at him the wrong way. Not only that, but in court, Jenkins was known to speak in some weird language. He said he used this language to communicate with an Egyptian serpent god. And this god was the one giving him orders to kill people. He also enjoyed talking about the people he killed and smiled the whole time while doing so. In the end, he was convicted for killing 4 individuals. Moving on to number 3, we have Damien Folks. In 2002, Damien Folks was sentenced to 12 years for a series of armed robberies that he had committed. But while in jail, he committed even more crimes. In 2010, he attempted to kill another prison inmate. He made a DIY shank by melting a razor blade onto plastic cutlery, and he used it to slice a guy's throat. As a result, he was transferred to a higher security prison. But that did not stop him. A year later, he killed an inmate by strangling him to death with strips of his bedding. These attacks gained him the title of being an extremely dangerous prisoner. In our second spot today, we have Alexander Pikushkin. Alexander is a Russian serial killer who wanted to complete the number of squares on a chessboard by killing 64 people. It's said that he has killed around at least 49 individuals and possibly as many as 60. In fact, he was inspired by another serial killer, Andrei Chikatilo, who I have talked about before. In his mind, he wanted to compete with him and kill even more individuals than Andrei did. Now, what I find the weirdest is when Alexander was young, he was said to be such a kind and sociable child. That was until one day when he got struck in the head by a swing. From then on, his whole demeanor completely changed and he got really aggressive. So they think that this accident turned him into a serial killer. And in our number 1 spot today, we have Pedro Rodrigues Filho, aka the Brazilian Maniac. This guy is a Brazilian serial killer who claims to have taken the lives of 100 individuals. He started killing at a young age, one of the first kills being his father. He apparently killed his father with a machete, cut out his heart, and then chewed on it. He also has been known to kill and torture a number of gang members. He did this all before he was 18. He was arrested on May 24th of 1973, during which he was placed in a car with another criminal who he killed for no reason. And while in prison, he went on to kill more people. It's said that he took the lives of 47 inmates in jail alone. Pedro served 42 years in prison before his release in 2018. Yes, he killed that many people and then he got released. Starting off this countdown, we have Gary Ridgway. Gary Ridgway, otherwise known as the Green River Killer, took the lives of 48 women between 1980 to 1990. But it's believed that his number may be as high as 71 people. He gets his name due to the fact that he would dump the bodies along riverbanks in South King County. In 2001, he was arrested. After his conviction, he did an interview where he talked all about his murders and how he had the desire to kill ever since he was little.
But I took my aggression and I couldn't take it out on my mom. I had to take it on my animals. And
as stated in the interview, he confessed that he started killing at a young age. He had this built-up anger towards his mom, but he couldn't harm her, so he would harm animals instead.
Living things?
Living things, killing animals.
Okay.
Killing animals.
In this interview, he went on to talk more about his victims in detail. Hearing someone confess to murder is just very, very disturbing. In our 9th spot, we have John Hughes. But before I go any further, make sure to hit that thumbs up button because it really helps us out.
I don't think like normal people, never have. I have racing thoughts. It's been that way since I was a kid. I'm constantly, it doesn't matter if I'm sleeping, if I'm awake, I'm constantly thinking of 100 things at one time.
John Hughes considers himself the Antichrist. He was arrested back in 2008 after killing a trucker at a rest stop along Interstate 29. This dude is intense and incredibly scary. He claims to have killed 15 to 20 people, but that hasn't been confirmed yet. Either way, in this interview for KMBC News, Lara Moretz gets the chance to interview him. And he talks about the people he has taken the lives of and why he did this.
Rest area, and that was a way for me to gain control, to show, I don't know, I guess assert my dominance, I guess you could say. That'd be the way to put it. And it shut everybody up for a while.
The scariest part of the interview is when Lara asks if he feels bad about killing people. And this was his response.
I don't feel bad about killing anyone.
Not personally, that I've personally done myself, no. I just view things as objects. People, animals, trees, cars, they're just all the same to me.
So no, he feels no remorse. In our 8th spot, we have Jose Martinez.
Explanation because I want to get them. I didn't want the cops to find them. I want to find them myself. We went to this little house. We broke in there and we found one. I shot him.
This dude is one you never want to mess with. And he reveals why during his interview. Basically, Jose was a hitman for a drug cartel. He admitted to killing 3 dozen people as a hitman, and dozens of others just on his own, many of whom were people that just pissed him off. For example, in this interview, he talks about one of his brother-in-law's friends. Whenever the friend would visit, he would tell him to park on the side of the road, not on his driveway. He told him this a number of times, yet he still continued to park on the driveway. So, what did he do? He asked the guy to take him for a ride in his truck. He then shot him, just to teach him a lesson.
I told him, didn't I tell you not to park in my driveway? And he said he didn't listen to nobody except his mother. Okay.
Moving on at number 6, we have Otis Toole. Otis Toole, or the Jacksonville Cannibal, is a serial killer convicted of 6 counts of murder. He's most famous for killing the son of America's Most Wanted host, John Walsh. In an interview from 1993, we see how dark and twisted Toole really is. He would talk about his dark desires, like watching an entire city burn. He then went on to justify his killings, saying that taking someone's life is no different than stepping on a bug or eating animal meat. There's way more disturbing stuff that he discusses, but it's just too much to talk about on YouTube. Like, he goes into depth about his killings. It's way too much to hear. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Joel Rifkin.
Tragedy happens in lives. Unfortunately, it was their lives.
The world wouldn't know his name until after his killing spree had ended. Now, in a rare prison interview, serial killer Joel Rifkin talks about his sickening crimes down to the smallest detail.
Joel Rifkin was an American serial killer responsible for taking the lives of 17 women in the 1990s. He was caught in 1993 when cops pulled him over for a missing license plate. But to their horrors, they found his latest victim in his trunk. He was then sentenced to 203 years in prison. In this interview, Joel just seems so proud of himself when he's recalling his crimes. He also talks about the police's interrogation process and why he confessed to the crimes. The most disturbing thing, though, is when he admits to keeping